So a fighter pilot walks into a bar. Now, how do you know he's a fighter pilot? Well, don't worry about that. He's going to tell you. But there may be some certain signs that may indicate he's a fighter pilot, okay? Scarf's a big one right here, okay? Glasses too. The hat not so much, because even non-pilots can wear this hat. I mean, it's a great hat. It keeps the sun out of your eyes. It keeps your ears warm, but, anybody in the Air Force can wear a hat like this, so that's not the determining factor. But he may have some other little things that he totes around as he walks in the bar. He may have the checklist strapped to his leg, stuff like that. Or he may have lighter fluid. Now, all pilots have the lighter fluid, because what you do is you set this hand on fire with the lighter fluid, and then the other hand is you. Okay, this is the hand on fire with the lighter fluid. Here we go. Got to get it in the gun sight. Okay, this is the one on fire that you set on fire, and this is you shooting him down. Okay, and of course, fighter pilots are always doing this. Pilots in general, maybe transport pilots not so much. Pilots in general do this. Okay, so if this fighter pilot walks in the bar and he says, "I'm a famous F-103 fighter pilot," okay, this is where you want to start not believing him, because the 103 didn't have a very good history, sorry to say. It's an interesting looking airplane. Yeah, a lot of neat pointy parts on it, but it didn't have a good history, and I'm going to explain that. Oh, by the way, this is Ron Rogers. You may not have noticed me in the disguise there, and unfortunately I dropped my glasses, so I can't see a darn thing. I'm going to have to pick them up here. But let's move on to to a little discussion about the missing Century series fighter airplanes. Here we go. All right, much better. I can see you all now. Okay, well, let's talk about the Century series of fighters. This was a very interesting time in the development of supersonic aircraft and fighters in general in this time period. Now, here's a little picture here. At the bottom there, you'll probably recognize the F-104. That's a really cool airplane. I got to fly that a little bit, and that's just super cool. And then next, of course, that was a Starfighter. And then we got the F-100, the Hun here. I never got to fly that. I heard it was quite challenging, especially with adverse yaw. And in fact, 2 pilots in my pilot training class had reserve slots in F-100s, and they both washed out. Yeah, that was kind of scary. Okay, then up around there, that is a 106, and you can see the little Coke bottle coming in there. That's the Coke bottle design. And that was one of the issues with the 103. They hadn't discovered area rule yet, which allows you to reduce drag and go supersonic much easier than not having the appropriate shape, the area rule. And of course, up at the top is the F-101, the Voodoo, really cool airplane. And the F-105 there, the Thunder Chief. Now, a lot of pilots, I know pilots who have flown that personally, and they really loved the aircraft. Now, of course, missing from here, yep, there it is, the 102. Now, the 102 was an interceptor, but it did not have area rule. And a funny little side there was a 102 setting out of the Sacramento airport for the longest time, and they had to get it under a bridge. So one of the reasons you could tell it was a 102 right away was the fact that it had that pointy fin there on the rudder. And what they had done to get this aircraft under the bridge at Sacramento was they had chopped that part off. So that looks like a 106, because the 106 has the top part cut off, but the 106 has better spacing, for the avionics behind the cockpit there. So I would taxi out when I was an airline pilot, and I'd ask my co-pilots, I'd say, "Hey, what airplane is that over there?" And they go, "Oh, that's a 106." And I go, "Nope, no, it's not." And they go, "No, it's got the tail cut off." I said, "Well, look at behind the fuselage there." And I'd ask ground control. I go, "Hey, what type of aircraft is that over there?" And they say, "Oh, that's a 102." And then we'd have a little discussion about how the tail got chopped off. Okay, well, there's some other interesting missing 100 series aircraft. And here's the 107. That 107 is pretty interesting, and I'll talk about that in a later video. And of course, we have the F-108. Now you're probably going, "I never saw this flying." And of course, this is the wonderful thing of art type of graphics is, no, it never did fly. Okay, that's the 108. Talk about that too. That's kind of interesting. And there is the 109. Now your F109. Now you're probably saying, boy, that looks like a awful lot like the F101 Voodoo, and you'd be right if you said that, because you are. Instead of calling it the F109, they go, well, it's the 101B model, which is what they should have probably designated it in the first place. Anyway. And of course, right there, that's the F-110. And you're going, what do you mean that's the F-110? That's an F-4. Well, the Air Force picked up the F-4, and I guess somebody didn't like the Navy designation of the F-4, so they were going to call it the F-110. Well, finally they acquiesced and go, okay, we'll call it the F-4. The F-4 Phantom, that's cool. And of course, I'll go just one farther here. This is the F-111, the Aardvark, and what a name, fighter. Of course, it's a super heavy fighter, but of course, the fighters are picking up a lot of weight these days with all the avionics and capabilities and stealth there. So they're getting heavy, but at the time, this was a very heavy fighter. This is the McNamara disaster. It was supposed to do everything, and until airplanes like the F-35 came along, that really didn't work out very well. But anyway, the Aardvark. Now, I can't make fun of people who flew the Aardvark, because I flew the Dragonfly, the A-37. The Starfighter was cool, but the Dragonfly, yeah, so I can't make fun of people who fly Aardvarks, because Dragonfly does not really elicit terror in the eyes of the enemy. Although with the capability of the 7.62 Gatling gun, 3,000 rounds a minute, and the ability to deliver ordnance very precisely, it was reasonably feared in Vietnam. But there again, I digress. Now let's talk about the 103. All right, so here's the mock-up of the F-103, and like I said, it was supposed to be a interceptor capable of intercepting Mach 3 bombers, because back in the 50s, we'd just done supersonic flight recently. Everybody thought high speed was the way to go, with the XB-70 coming along, things like that. So we needed a very fast interceptor. Okay, back in 1949, they proposed this. Now, as you all know, pilots are capable of, all sorts of flying, all sorts of fun things, but we're limited by engine power and materials. Of course, the Wright brothers, with their 10 horsepower engine, they did an amazing job for such an extremely low-powered engine. And of course, materials was an issue back then, and materials in high-speed flight was an issue. And they wanted to make this aircraft out of titanium and stainless steel. Well, titanium has never been easy to work, and it certainly wasn't very easy to work back in the 50s. They haven't developed a lot of techniques. But the Air Force says, hey, we want an interceptor, and we want you guys, all the companies out there to submit designs. So Republic was the winning contractor on, if you want to call it winning. They only built a mock-up, but they won the contract here. But it was an interesting time, because a lot of people had good proposals. They submitted the proposal on July 1951, and one of three designs. And Convair also had a proposal of an XF-92 that evolved into the F-102. Lockheed had a design that evolved into the F-104, and Republic's design was called an AP-57. And it was, like I said, built almost entirely of titanium, capable of Mach 3 and altitudes of 60,000 feet. And they did the full scale-up model. Let's talk a little bit about the design characteristics of this aircraft, because it's actually got some interesting aspects to it. All right. All of the control surfaces were actually delta wing type of configurations here. The main wing actually could vary the incident, kind of like the F-8, where they could increase the incidence to get you more lift, so you could take off and then you could lower it back down. The wings were split at 2/3 of the way out. You need a large area for control surface due to shockwave placement and that. That's why a lot of supersonic aircraft have all flyable tails, because the shockwave can give you issues with not being able to generate control power. But these ailerons, they called them tipperons because they were out at the tip. The wing was split 2/3 of the way out, and then the whole wingtip could move up and down for roll control. The elevators there are kind of, yeah, they look a little bit underdesigned, a little bit not having as much surface area as they probably should. And of course, at high-speed flight, you need you have to brush on a lot of CN beta. That's the lateral damping force, because you tend to lose that as you go supersonic. The ability, that's why some of the early airplanes had an issue with going sideways and disintegrating, and that's always been an issue at high-speed flight. So you have to have a lot of CN beta, and you get that by having a big control surface area. And that rudder, for a supersonic aircraft, especially a Mach 3 one, is kind of small. And what they did was they had a ventral fin that folded up underneath. When the aircraft took off, then it could come down, kind of like where the X-15 had that extra ventral fin that it would jettison before it came into land. Well, that's kind of the thing here, except the fin would come back down, so it'd give you better stability there. Okay, that's the design there. Rather interesting. And of course, the thing that really sticks out was back in the very early 50s, they did not know about the concept of area rule, where you would bring the fuselage in where the wings go out, so you keep kind of a constant cross-sectional area to the airflow. Otherwise, you get a big high spike in drag. And like anybody who's flown the 38, you could, when you're going supersonic, if you're approaching it kind of gradually, you come up about 0.97, 0.98, and it just kind of stagnates there because the drag is really coming up, and then boom, you shoot through the speed of sound, and all of a sudden you're on the other side of it, and the drag goes down then, supersonic. Very interesting aerodynamics there. Okay, they had a lot of problem with the titanium construction. That's probably one of the things that really caused them a lot of issue. Oh, the other thing about this, see a scoop on the bottom there. The original aircraft was going to have a canopy. That was going to be a too high drag thing. And of course, there's another issue where the limiting speed on the F4 it has the it's the F-15, where the front canopy can melt if you go too fast. The F-4, its turbine inlet temperature gets too high. It's been a while ago. Memory fades after a while. Anyway, so the canopy would have had some issues with heating that I don't think they really realized. And they had some talk even at the time on some of these designs about, okay, we'll go Mach 3, maybe we'll go Mach 4, Mach 5. They didn't realize the heating issues. It's a world of difference between going Mach 5 and going Mach 3. And the main thing is one of the main things is heating. And one of the last X-15s got into a lot of problem. It got some parts of the aircraft kind of burnt away when they were exploring high-speed flight, which was good to learn. They learned that aerodynamics, heating, and how the shock wave could affect heating in local areas. I'm digressing here, but how the shock wave could affect heating and cause you problems of getting concentration of a lot of high-intensity thermal effects at small locations. But anyway, the ejection seat on this was kind of interesting. It ejected downward because you didn't want to hit the tail. That was part of the problem on like the F-104, where it had a downward ejection seat for a while too, because they didn't have the ability to get the seat out fast enough to avoid hitting that tail. So they had a downward ejection seat. And the way the pilot got into the aircraft, or was to get into the aircraft, was the whole seat was to be lowered. You walked up, you sat in the seat, and then you raised the whole seat up in the aircraft. Kind of cool there, huh? But let's talk about the other issue, the other main issue, and that's propulsion. So the aircraft was going to be powered by the J67 engine. Now, there's a lot of issues with high-speed flight. Typical compressor engines don't work well supersonic. You have to shock the air down because the blades cannot take supersonic air. They stall. So you have to do first what's known as an oblique shock, and then a normal shock, like in the T-38. That's why the inlets have that little bit of slant, and they have the ramps to control the shock waves. But so for a regular jet engine to work, the type with the compressors and that, you have to have a subsonic air, and you get a lot of losses there. And of course, where the air is slowed down, the stagnation air temperature goes up, and it gets very hot. So now you got a heating issue with materials. basically, normal jet engines don't work very well at the very high speeds above Mach 1. Now, the nice thing is ramjets work fairly well above Mach 1, but they don't work below that typically. So you have to use a jet engine to get it going, and then you can go to a ramjet. So they basically had the J67, which would be powering an RJ for ramjet 55. And here is a more complete mock-up there. So what you do is you bypass the compressor section. Of course, they developed this with work on the XB70 engines, and of course the SR71 with its bypass of the compressor section, and it gets real complicated, but it bypasses that section. But the trouble with ramjets, I mean, they solved it, and it's very, very technical aspects of solving it. But they solved it better with like the SR71 engines. But ramjets are terribly inefficient fuel-wise. Of course, they're doing a lot of work on wave riding and stuff like this, so it works better. But basically, it just wasn't coming together. Well, so the J67 wasn't working out. They weren't able to get past some certain design issues. So they said, okay, we'll put the J65. Well, unfortunately, the J65 was a much less powerful engine. And of course, you can see things are going downhill pretty fast here. You're losing power. You've got trouble with materials, and it was a design concept ahead of its time. It took a while for materials to catch up, so it was canceled on 21st August 1957. Now, it's kind of interesting, some of the parameters they talk about. They were talking about maximum speed was Mach 3 as a turbojet and Mach 5 ramjet only. They would have had problems they didn't anticipate with heating at that speed, and this would have never made it with the lack of area rule anyway. Service ceiling was supposed to be around 80,000 feet. Maximum rate of climb was 19,000 feet per minute, well, which isn't too bad. And it was going to have some rockets and missiles in there to shoot down the enemy aircraft, which of course was Russian. Now, interesting aspect about this whole thing, I went into the Air Force in 1973, and I came across some of these old magazines people were throwing out. I'm not sure if TAC Attack even exists as a magazine at the time, but this was my first introduction, this 1972 magazine, about the Lost Century aircraft. And of course, up to that point, I'm fairly new. You know, I mean, I'd seen the F-100s and that, and the various aircraft, but it never quite occurred to me that what was the interesting designations of these aircraft that never came to be. And a lot of them were prototypes in that they actually thought they were going to build, and they gave them an F number, but they never came to fruition. So this was a rather interesting article to read, and I still have the magazine, and I've got a number of these that I kept that had interesting articles. And of course, it goes into various details. That's the F-108 there, which I'd like to talk about later, which is kind of a cool design that also never got past the mock-up stage. So if any fighter pilot goes into a bar and tells you he's an F-108 pilot, don't believe him either. He could tell you he's an F-110 pilot, but then you'd know he is a little carried away with history and doesn't know his aircraft very well. Oh, by the way, one of the funny things was Fliegel. That was the cartoon on the back. So anybody who's seen this magazine, I'm sure you remember the intrepid aviator Fliegel. So that's the story of the 103 that never came about. It gives you some interesting design look history on the evolution of design, some of the concepts they had back then, some of the things they got right, some of the things they got very wrong, and evolution of design. And of course, the main thing on this aircraft is it did not have area rule. It had an issue with the size of the vertical stabilizer. Also, the horizontal stabilizers were undersized, but the vertical stabilizer was undersized. They made up for it later with the ventral fin. But this is the time where they didn't understand really high-speed aerodynamics very well. They didn't understand area rule, and they also probably didn't have as great of a concept or understanding of the lateral damping force, Cn beta, which is very important, and that's why supersonic aircraft have very large vertical stabilizers. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you found it interesting and informative, and you can spot an illicit and undeserving and a pilot who's trying to totally BS you, blow smoke in a bar. And of course, that never happens, right? Nobody ever goes into a bar and tells you they're a pilot, and it's not true, right? Oh, I got some funny stories on that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching. Thanks for watching.